A black single dad gave his only coat to a shivering woman on a freezing night, but the very next day, that woman revealed she was a powerful CEO who hired him as her CFO. Yet behind the applause and promises of a better life lurks a secret war of prejudice, betrayal, and redemption that will push him to the edge. Can kindness alone survive in a world determined to break him? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The bitter Chicago wind cut through Marcus Bennett's worn sweater as he trudged through the snow-covered streets. His shoulders ached from a long day of lifting boxes at the warehouse, followed by his evening shift mopping floors at the downtown office building. The metallic taste of exhaustion filled his mouth, but thoughts of his daughter Layla warmed his tired heart. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door would have tucked her in by now. The kind, elderly woman never accepted payment for watching Layla, insisting that the 8-year-old's bright smile was payment enough. Marcus remembered how Layla had hugged him extra tight this morning, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Daddy," before he'd left for his first job. Those simple words had carried him through another grueling day. Snowflakes danced beneath the yellow glow of street lamps, coating Marcus's dark coat with delicate white patterns that melted almost instantly. The coat was his one good piece of clothing, bought 3 years ago when he'd still been working as an accountant, before everything had changed. His mind drifted to Sarah, his late wife, and the way she used to tease him about his attachment to routines. "Life isn't a balance sheet, honey," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. "Sometimes the best things happen when the numbers don't add up." The memory brought a sad smile to his face as he adjusted his backpack, heavy with the day's worth of carrying. The empty streets echoed with his footsteps. Most people were already home at this hour, warm and comfortable with their families. Marcus checked his watch, 10:45 p.m. His feet burned from standing all day, but he couldn't afford the bus fare. Every dollar saved was another dollar for Layla's future. As he walked, Marcus whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Despite their struggles, they had enough to eat, a roof over their heads, and most importantly, they had each other. Sarah had taught him that gratitude wasn't about having everything you wanted, but appreciating everything you had. The wind picked up, carrying stinging particles of ice that made Marcus pull his coat tighter. He passed the closed storefronts, their windows dark except for the occasional security light. The for-lease signs seemed to multiply each week, a silent testimony to the neighborhood's struggles. Through the swirling snow, Marcus spotted the bus stop ahead. Its metal shelter offered little protection from the elements, and the schedule posted inside was barely readable through years of weather damage. He usually passed it without a second glance, but tonight was different. A woman stood there, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her business suit and heels suggested she'd come from downtown, but she wore no coat, just a thin blazer that offered little protection against the brutal Chicago winter. She was shivering violently, checking her phone with trembling hands. Marcus slowed his pace. The woman's distress was evident in the way she stamped her feet and huddled against the shelter's wall. He thought of Sarah again, remembering how she'd always stop to help others, no matter their circumstances. "Kindness doesn't cost anything," she would say, "but its value is priceless." He glanced down at his coat. It was warm, well-made, and the only decent piece of outerwear he owned. He needed it for interviews, for those rare occasions when he could pursue opportunities that might lift him and Layla out of their current situation. But Sarah's voice echoed in his mind, along with the scripture verses about helping those in need. Without letting himself overthink it, Marcus approached the bus stop. The woman looked up, startled by his presence. Her face showed a mixture of fear and resignation, a black man approaching her at night. Marcus had seen that look too many times before, but he didn't let it deter him. Moving slowly and deliberately, he slipped off his coat. The cold immediately bit through his sweater, but he focused on the task at hand. With gentle movements, he held out the coat and carefully draped it over the woman's shoulders. She stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise. Snowflakes continued to fall between them, creating a silent curtain of white. The moment stretched out, filled with unspoken words and unexpected grace. Marcus took a step back, giving her space. The woman's fingers curled around the edges of the coat, clutching it closer. Her shock was evident in her expression, as if she couldn't quite process this act of kindness from a stranger. The snow fell harder now, collecting on Marcus's sweater and in his short-cropped hair. He felt the cold seeping into his bones, but something warm bloomed in his chest, the same feeling he got when Layla smiled at him or when he managed to help someone in need despite his own struggles. The woman stood there, stunned into silence, as Marcus remained rooted to his spot. The coat that had kept him warm through countless winter days now protected her from the bitter cold, and despite the chill that ran through him, he knew he'd made the right choice. The elegant woman clutched the warm coat around her shoulders, her eyes wide with disbelief at the stranger's kindness. Snowflakes settled on her silver hair as she reached into her designer purse with trembling fingers. "Please," she said, pulling out a leather wallet. "Let me pay you for the coat. It's freezing, and you'll need it." Marcus shook his head, a gentle smile warming his tired face. The streetlight cast a soft glow around them, making the falling snow sparkle like tiny diamonds. "Take care of yourself, ma'am. That's worth more than money." Eleanor's hand, still gripping several crisp bills, slowly lowered. She studied his face, noting the kindness in his eyes despite the exhaustion etched in the lines around them. The coat carried his warmth and a faint scent of laundry detergent, clearly cherished and well-maintained despite its age. The familiar rumble of the approaching bus broke through the quiet night. Its headlights cut through the snowy darkness, illuminating the small bus shelter. Eleanor took a step toward the curb, then turned back to Marcus. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No need for thanks," Marcus replied, rubbing his arms against the cold. "Just stay warm." The bus doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. Eleanor climbed aboard, casting one last glance at the man who had shown such unexpected kindness. Through the window, she watched his figure grow smaller as the bus pulled away from the curb. Marcus stood for a moment, watching the taillights disappear into the snowy night. The wind bit through his thin sweater now, and he wrapped his arms tightly around himself as he started walking. His apartment was still 15 blocks away, but the thought of his daughter kept his feet moving forward. The city streets were nearly empty at this hour. His footprints left deep impressions in the fresh snow, and his breath came out in white puffs that disappeared into the darkness. The cold seemed to seep into his very bones, but he couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. That woman had needed the coat more than he did in that moment. As he walked, Marcus thought about the extra hours he'd been picking up at both jobs. The warehouse work was tough on his body, and the late-night cleaning shift meant less time with Lila, but every dollar counted. He'd been saving for months, hoping to build up enough of a cushion to finally go after the accounting positions he was qualified for. Those interviews required his good suit, and until tonight, his only proper winter coat. The wind howled between the buildings, sending icy fingers down his neck. Marcus picked up his pace, his dress shoes slipping slightly on the snowy sidewalk. He thought of Lila, safe and warm at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment next door. His elderly neighbor had become a godsend since Sarah passed, watching Layla during his evening shifts and never accepting more than a token payment for her help. Finally, Marcus reached his building, a modest brick apartment complex on the city's west side. His fingers were so cold they fumbled with the key, but eventually he made it inside. The building's heating was temperamental at best, but after the outdoor chill, the hallway felt almost tropical. He knocked softly on Mrs. Rodriguez's door. The old woman opened it with a warm smile, pressing a finger to her lips and pointing to her couch where Layla lay sleeping, her math workbook still open on the coffee table. "She tried to wait up for you," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. "Such a good student, that one. Did all her homework without me having to ask." Marcus's heart swelled with pride as he carefully lifted his daughter into his arms. At 8 years old, she was getting almost too big to carry, but he wasn't ready to give up these precious moments. Lila stirred slightly, instinctively curling into his chest. "Thank you," he whispered to Mrs. Rodriguez. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Back in their apartment, Marcus carried Lila to her small bedroom. The walls were decorated with her artwork, bright crayon drawings of their little family, including a smiling angel she always said was her mama watching over them. He gently laid her on the bed, pulling her warm comforter up to her chin. Layla's face was peaceful in sleep, so much like her mother's it made his heart ache. He brushed a soft kiss against her forehead, smoothing back her dark curls. Kneeling beside her bed, Marcus closed his eyes. The prayers came easily, as they did every night. He prayed for strength to keep going, for guidance to make the right choices, for opportunities to give Layla the life she deserved. Most of all, he prayed for better days ahead, not just for them, but for everyone struggling through cold nights and hard times. In the quiet of the room, with his daughter's gentle breathing the only sound, Marcus felt a deep peace settle over him despite the lingering cold in his bones. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, with faith and determination leading the way. Morning sunlight streamed through the faded curtains of Marcus Bennett's modest apartment, casting warm patches on the worn carpet. He stood before the bathroom mirror, adjusting the navy blue tie that had seen better days. His reflection showed a man determined to make something of himself, despite the worry lines creasing his forehead. The suit, his only one, hung a bit loose now. Too many skipped meals to make sure Layla had enough to eat had taken their toll. Still, he brushed off every inch of the dark fabric with careful attention, making sure it looked as presentable as possible. "Daddy," Layla's small voice called from the doorway. She stood there in her favorite pink pajamas, her curly hair still messy from sleep. "You look like a superhero." Marcus couldn't help but smile. "A superhero, huh? I don't know about that, baby girl." "Yes, you are," she insisted, padding over to him on bare feet. "You're going to get that big job today. I just know it." He knelt down to her level, straightening her Wonder Woman nightshirt. "How do you know that?" "Because you're the smartest daddy in the whole wide world." She reached up to touch his cheek. "But you gotta promise me something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Promise you'll smile. Mrs. Rodriguez says people like it when you smile." Lila demonstrated with a big toothy grin. Marcus chuckled, pulling her into a tight hug. "Mrs. Rodriguez is a wise woman. I promise I'll smile." He breathed in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo, drawing strength from her innocent faith in him. In the kitchen, he made sure Layla had her breakfast ready: cereal, milk, and sliced bananas just the way she liked it. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door would be over soon to watch her, as she had done countless times before. "Now remember," he said, helping Layla into her chair at their small kitchen table. "Be good for Mrs. Rodriguez. Do your homework as soon as you get back from school." "I know, Daddy." She spooned up some cereal. "Can we have pizza tonight if you get the job?" Marcus's heart squeezed. Even a small pizza would stretch this week's budget thin, but the hope in her eyes made him nod. "We'll see, baby girl. We'll see." A knock at the door announced Mrs. Rodriguez's arrival. The kind-faced woman had been their neighbor and Layla's unofficial grandmother figure since they'd moved into the building 3 years ago. "Buena suerte," she said, giving Marcus a warm hug. "Good luck. You deserve this." The morning air was crisp as Marcus walked to the bus stop, his dress shoes clicking against the sidewalk. Yesterday's snow had mostly melted, leaving only dirty patches in shaded corners. His thin jacket didn't offer much protection against the lingering winter chill, especially without his good coat, but he squared his shoulders against the cold. On the bus, Marcus reviewed the company information on his phone one more time. Whitfield Enterprises was a mid-sized firm with a solid reputation. The position was for a junior accountant, modest, but it would be a start, a chance to use his degree finally. He'd graduated with honors before everything fell apart, before Sarah got sick. He pushed the painful memories aside, focusing instead on the numbers and facts he'd memorized about the company. The bus windows fogged up with passengers' breath as they headed downtown, the tall buildings growing closer with each block. The Whitfield building stretched toward the sky, its glass windows reflecting the morning Sunday. Marcus checked his watch, 30 minutes early. Perfect. He took a deep breath, remembering Lila's words about smiling, and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was all polished marble and sleek modern furniture. A security guard checked his ID and directed him to the 11th floor. In the elevator, Marcus straightened his tie one last time, silently mouthing the words he'd practiced for the interview. The accounting department's reception area was quiet, decorated in muted grays and blues. A young woman at the desk looked up as he approached. "Marcus Bennett, for the 9:30 interview." She checked her computer and nodded. "Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Marcus sat in one of the plush chairs, his resume folder balanced on his knee. Other candidates came and went, all younger, wearing newer suits, carrying leather portfolios instead of his carefully preserved folder. But he remembered Lila's faith in him and kept his head high. The minutes ticked by slowly. Marcus observed everything around him, the way the office hummed with quiet efficiency, the modern art on the walls, the subtle scent of coffee from somewhere nearby. He'd always been good at noticing details. It had helped him excel in accounting, this ability to see how small things connected to create the bigger picture. "Mr. Bennett," the receptionist called. "They're ready for you now." Marcus stood, smoothing his suit jacket. He followed her down a hallway, lined with frosted glass offices. She stopped at a corner office and opened the door. His heart nearly stopped. There, behind a massive desk, sat the woman from the bus stop. She looked different in the morning light, more commanding in her tailored business suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. But there was no mistaking those kind eyes that had looked at him with such gratitude just yesterday. Eleanor Whitfield's eyes widened with recognition, and for a moment, they both stood frozen in surprise, the memory of a snowy night and an act of kindness hanging in the air between them. Eleanor Whitfield sat across from Marcus in the sleek conference room, her silver hair elegantly styled and her posture commanding yet warm. The morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a gentle glow across the polished mahogany table between them. Marcus's hands were clasped tightly in his lap, his heart racing as he recognized the woman he'd given his coat to just last night. "Mr. Bennett," Eleanor began, her voice gentle but professional. "I believe we had an unexpected encounter last evening." She gestured to the coat that hung perfectly pressed on a coat rack near her desk. His coat. Marcus's cheeks warmed. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize if that makes this awkward." "On the contrary." Eleanor's eyes crinkled at the corners. "It speaks volumes about your character. But let's focus on your qualifications, shall we?" Marcus nodded gratefully, relieved to move past the coincidence. He watched as Eleanor opened his resume, her reading glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. "Your academic record is impressive. Top of your class at Chicago State University, with a degree in accounting and finance. Yet your recent work history shows you've been working as a night janitor and morning barista." Her tone held no judgment, only curiosity. Marcus straightened in his chair. "Yes, ma'am. After my wife passed, I became a single father. The corporate positions I applied for." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "They weren't as welcoming as I'd hoped. But my daughter needed stability, so I took what work I could find." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully, making notes. "Tell me about your approach to financial management." For the next hour, Marcus's expertise shone through as they discussed various scenarios. He explained complex financial concepts in simple, practical terms, drawing from both his education and real-world experience managing tight budgets. "Your perspective on our company's current investment strategy is quite insightful," Eleanor remarked, referring to the analysis he'd prepared for the interview. "Most candidates simply praise our success. You've identified areas where we could better serve smaller businesses in our community. Sometimes the best opportunities for growth come from looking beyond the obvious," Marcus replied. "My experience has taught me that numbers tell stories about people, not just profits." Eleanor set down her pen and studied him intently. "Mr. Bennett, you intrigue me. Last night, you gave away your only good coat to a stranger. Today, you've demonstrated exceptional financial acumen combined with genuine compassion. That's a rare combination." Marcus shifted in his seat, unsure how to respond. "I just try to do what's right, ma'am, and that's exactly what we need." Eleanor stood and walked to the window, her reflection thoughtful in the glass. "Mr. Bennett, I'm not going to offer you the accounting position you applied for." Marcus's heart sank, but he maintained his composure. He'd been here before, the letdown after a promising interview. Eleanor turned back to face him. "Instead, I'd like to offer you something more challenging. We need a chief financial officer who understands both numbers and people. Someone who can see beyond spreadsheets to the lives those numbers represent." Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm offering you a position as CFO in training," Eleanor continued, her voice firm and clear. "You'll work directly with our current CFO, who's retiring in 18 months. During that time, you'll learn every aspect of our operation. If you prove yourself as capable as I believe you are, the position will be yours." Marcus gripped the arms of his chair, overwhelmed. "Mrs. Whitfield, that's incredibly generous, but surely there are more qualified candidates." "More traditionally qualified, perhaps," Eleanor agreed. "But qualifications aren't everything. I've built this company by trusting my instincts about people. Last night, you showed me who you are when you thought nobody was watching. Today, you've shown me who you could be, if given the chance." Tears pricked at Marcus's eyes, but he blinked them back. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," Eleanor smiled. "The starting salary is $120,000, with full benefits effective immediately. The training period will be intense, and some board members may not be pleased with my decision. But I believe in you, Mr. Bennett. The question is, do you believe in yourself?" Marcus thought of Layla, of all the nights he'd prayed for a chance like this. His voice was steady when he answered, "Yes, ma'am, I do." "Good." Eleanor extended her hand across the table. "Welcome to Whitfield Industries, Marcus." Marcus stood and shook her hand, his grip firm despite his trembling fingers. In that moment, all the years of struggle, of doors closed in his face, of swallowing his pride to provide for his daughter, it all seemed worth it. Hope, bright and unexpected as the morning sun, filled his chest. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," she replied. "Now, shall we discuss your start date? And please," she added with a warm smile, "call me Eleanor." The elevator doors opened to the 32nd floor of Thompson, Whitfield Financial, and Marcus Bennett stepped out, adjusting his newly purchased tie. The pristine hallway stretched before him, its walls lined with abstract art and achievements spanning decades. His dress shoes clicked against the marble flooring as he made his way to the main office area. "Mr. Bennett," a cheerful receptionist waved him over. "Welcome to your first day. I'm Amy. Mrs. Whitfield asked me to show you to your office." Marcus smiled, grateful for the friendly face. "Thank you, Amy, and please, call me Marcus." As they walked through the open office space, Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Some employees offered genuine smiles and nods, while others quickly looked away when he met their gaze. The air felt thick with unspoken thoughts. Amy led him to a corner office with a view of the Chicago skyline. "Here you are. Mrs. Whitfield wanted you to have proper space for your CFO training program." Marcus ran his hand along the smooth desk, still processing how much his life had changed in just a few days. "This island, incredible. Thank you." As Amy left, Marcus noticed two men in suits pause outside his office, speaking in low voices. Despite their attempt at discretion, their words carried clearly through the partially open door. "CFO training?" "He was working 2 jobs last week," one whispered. "Eleanor's lost it," the other responded. "Harvard grads can't get this position, but some guy off the street walks in." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept unpacking his belongings, arranging family photos on his desk. The largest was of Layla at her school talent show, beaming with pride after singing "This Little Light of Mine." A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. A woman with warm brown eyes and curly hair pulled back in a professional bun stood in the doorway. "Hi there. I'm Janet Rodriguez, Operations Director. Thought I'd stop by and welcome you properly." "Nice to meet you, Janet." Marcus extended his hand, noticing her firm handshake and genuine smile. Let me give you the real tour, she offered. The one that includes which coffee maker actually works and where to find the good snacks. As they walked, Janet pointed out various departments and introduced him to several colleagues. Some, like Tom from accounting and Sarah from legal, seemed genuinely welcoming. Others barely looked up from their computers. Passing the break room, they overheard snippets of conversation that fell silent as they approached. Completely out of place. Just wait until he has to present to the board. Janet rolled her eyes and spoke a little louder than necessary. And here's where the office gossips hang out instead of working. Moving on. Marcus appreciated her directness but felt his stomach twist. He'd faced prejudice before, but the stakes felt higher now. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about creating a better future for Lila. By lunchtime, Marcus had reviewed preliminary reports and started learning the company's financial systems. Janet appeared at his door again. "Come on, new guy, you're having lunch with me." They found a quiet corner in the building's cafe. Marcus picked at his sandwich, his appetite diminished by the morning's tensions. "Okay, spill it," Janet said, opening her salad container. "I can see those comments getting to you." Marcus sighed. "That obvious, huh? Listen." Janet leaned forward, her voice firm but kind. "I've been here 8 years. Started as a receptionist, single mom, Latina. Trust me, I know those stares. But you know what? Eleanor saw something in you, just like she saw something in me." "How did you handle it?" Marcus asked quietly. "By remembering why I'm here, and by proving them wrong, one day at a time." Janet's eyes sparkled with determination. "Those Harvard boys whispering about you? Half of them couldn't balance their lunch receipts without help. You've got real-world experience. Use it." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you, Janet. Really. Hey, us underdogs have to stick together," she winked. "Now eat your sandwich. You'll need energy to deal with all these spreadsheets." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and orientation sessions. By evening, Marcus's head was swimming with information, but his spirit felt lighter knowing he had at least one ally in the building. He picked up Layla from their neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment, where she stayed after school. The 7-year-old bounced with excitement, clutching a drawing she'd made. In their small but tidy apartment, Marcus warmed up simple chicken and rice for dinner. Layla set their little table with careful precision, humming to herself. "Baby girl," Marcus said as they sat down, "I've got some good news to share." Layla's eyes widened. "Did you get the big job, Daddy?" Marcus nodded, his heart swelling at her immediate joy. "I did, and it's even bigger than I thought it would be. Things are going to be different for us now." "Different good?" Layla asked, spooning rice onto her plate. "Different good," Marcus confirmed. "We might be able to get a bigger apartment soon, maybe even closer to your school." "Can we get a cat?" Layla's eyes sparkled with hope. Marcus laughed, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Let's take it one step at a time, sweet pea. But things are looking up, I promise." Layla nodded solemnly. "I'm proud of you, Daddy. You're the best at everything." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes, thinking about the challenges ahead. But looking at his daughter's unwavering faith in him, he knew he would face whatever came his way. He had spent years teaching Layla that their circumstances didn't define them. Now it was time to prove it. They finished their dinner, Layla chattering about her day at school while Marcus listened, treasuring this simple moment. Whatever doubts and prejudices awaited him at work tomorrow, he had everything that truly mattered right here at this small table, in the eyes of a little girl who believed in him without question. Eleanor Whitfield sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, her silver hair catching the morning light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Around her, 12 board members shifted in their leather chairs, papers rustling as they reviewed Marcus Bennett's resume for the 10th time. "This is unprecedented." Richard Morton, a board member with thick glasses and thinning hair, broke the tense silence. He tapped his finger against Marcus's employment history. "A cashier at a grocery store? A night security guard? These aren't the qualifications we look for in executive positions." Eleanor's steady gaze met his. "And yet, his accounting degree and previous financial experience are exactly what we need. From a state college, Patricia Chen interjected, her red blazer as sharp as her tone. Not Harvard, not Yale, not even Northwestern, which is right here in Chicago. I wasn't aware we had become such education snobs, Eleanor replied, her voice calm but firm. Marcus Bennett graduated with honors. His references from his previous accounting position are stellar. Thomas Bradford, the eldest board member, cleared his throat. Eleanor, we respect your judgment. You've led this company brilliantly for 15 years, but this feels rushed. The man gave you his coat at a bus stop, and suddenly he's on track to become CFO? Eleanor's blue eyes flashed. If you're suggesting I made this decision based on a single act of kindness, you don't know me very well, Thomas. She stood, smoothing her charcoal gray dress. Yes, that moment showed me his character. But his interview, his innovative ideas about our upcoming merger, and his clear understanding of our financial challenges are why he's here. The shareholders will have concerns, Patricia pressed. Our stock could take a hit when word gets out. When word gets out that we've hired a qualified professional who happens to be a single father? Eleanor's voice carried an edge of steel. Or is there something else about Marcus that concerns you? The room fell silent. Several board members suddenly found their notepads fascinating. Let's be frank, Eleanor continued. I've heard the whispers. Yes, Marcus Bennett is black. Yes, he came from a modest background. And yes, he's worked hard jobs to support his daughter. In my book, that shows character, resilience, and determination. Exactly the qualities we need in leadership. Richard adjusted his glasses nervously. It's not about race, Eleanor. It's about experience, about connections, about understanding our world. Our world? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. The world of comfortable boardrooms and country club memberships? Perhaps we need someone who understands a different world, someone who knows what our employees and customers really face. She picked up Marcus's resume, holding it like a shield. His financial analysis of our charitable giving program was brilliant. He found ways to triple our impact without increasing costs. That's the kind of thinking we need. He's been here 3 days, Patricia objected. It's too soon to... I've made my decision, Eleanor cut in. As CEO, I have that authority. I'm not asking for permission, I'm informing you of my choice. Marcus Bennett will be our CFO in training. Judge him on his performance, not your preconceptions. The board members exchanged glances, but none challenged her directly. They knew that tone in Eleanor's voice. She'd used it 15 years ago when they doubted a widow could run her husband's company. They'd been wrong then. As the board filed out, Thomas lingered behind. Eleanor, I hope you're right about this one. She smiled softly. I am, Thomas. Sometimes the best investments aren't the obvious ones. 12 hours later, Marcus sat alone in his new office, surrounded by financial reports and spreadsheets. The city lights twinkled beyond his window, a constellation of human activity spread out below. His tie lay loosened around his neck, his sleeves rolled up as he worked. The numbers danced before his eyes: profit margins, operational costs, investment returns. He'd always had a gift for seeing patterns in the chaos of figures, finding opportunities others missed. Tonight, he was reviewing 5 years of quarterly reports, learning everything he could about the company's financial history. He reached for his coffee cup, finding it empty for the 3rd time. The cleaning crew had already come and gone, leaving him alone on the floor. The solitude felt familiar. He'd spent countless nights as a security guard, walking empty hallways. But now he wasn't watching other people's success. He was building his own. Marcus stood and walked to the window, pressing his hand against the cool glass. The city sprawled before him, a maze of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there, Layla was sleeping at their neighbor's apartment again, dreaming her 7-year-old dreams. He'd promised to pick her up by 10. I'm going to make it, baby girl, he whispered to the glass. They gave me a chance and I'm going to prove I deserve it. He turned back to his desk, determination settling over him like a familiar coat. The whispers in the halls didn't matter. The doubting looks didn't matter. What mattered were the numbers in front of him, the opportunities he could see, and the future he could build. Marcus pulled another report from the stack, uncapping his highlighter. He had work to do. Marcus stepped out of the elevator on Saturday morning, holding Layla's small hand in his. The office floor was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the empty desks. "This is where you work, Daddy?" Layla asked, her eyes wide as she took in the sleek furniture and tall windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. "Sure is, sweetheart." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry I had to bring you in today, but I promise it won't take too long." "It's okay." Layla clutched her backpack, filled with homework and her favorite coloring books. "It looks fancy," Marcus chuckled. "Just remember what we talked about: indoor voice, and careful with your crayons on any surfaces." As they rounded the corner toward his office, voices drifted from Eleanor's corner office. The door was open, and Marcus could see Eleanor sitting at her desk while a young girl about Layla's age drew pictures on a spare notepad. Eleanor looked up and smiled warmly. "Marcus, I didn't expect to see you today. Just catching up on some reports." He gestured to Lila. "This is my daughter, Lila. My regular sitter's out of town this weekend." Eleanor's face lit up. "Well, what perfect timing. This is my granddaughter, Sophie. She's keeping me company today, too." Sophie looked up from her drawing, her shy smile matching her grandmother's warmth. Lila gave a little wave, and Sophie waved back. "Why don't you girls get to know each other while we grown-ups work for a bit?" Eleanor suggested. "Sophie has some lovely art supplies she might share." Sophie perked up. "Do you like to draw?" she asked Layla. Layla nodded eagerly. "I love drawing, and coloring too. Come on, I'll show you my special markers." Sophie gestured to the small table where she'd set up her art station. Marcus watched as Layla carefully set down her backpack and joined Sophie. Within minutes, the girls were giggling and comparing favorite colors. "They're natural friends," Eleanor observed quietly. "Children have such a gift for seeing past all the barriers we adults put up." Marcus nodded, touched by the simple truth of her words. "Thank you for letting her stay. I promise we won't be here long. Take all the time you need." Eleanor waved off his concern. "It's nice to have some young energy in the office." Over the next hour, the sound of children's laughter filled the usually quiet floor. Marcus worked at his desk, occasionally glancing up to check on Lila. The girls had moved their art party to the break room table, spreading out their drawings and sharing stories. "My daddy makes the best pancakes," Layla was saying as Marcus passed by to refill his coffee. "He puts chocolate chips in them and makes funny shapes." "Really?" Sophie's eyes widened. "Gran makes good pancakes too, but they're always round." "Maybe we could have pancakes together sometime," Layla suggested innocently. Marcus's heart squeezed at his daughter's hopeful tone. He knew how much she missed having friends over, how their tight budget and his work schedule made playdates difficult. To his surprise, Eleanor appeared beside him. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," she said warmly. "Perhaps next weekend? I make a mean fruit compote to go with those round pancakes." The girls' excited squeals filled the break room. Marcus felt overwhelmed by Eleanor's kindness, but before he could respond, Sophie tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. "Gran, can we show Layla your special drawer?" Eleanor laughed. "Ah, you mean my secret stash of art supplies? Well, I suppose we could take a peek." The girls followed Eleanor back to her office, where she opened a bottom drawer filled with premium-colored pencils, sketch pads, and other art materials. "I always keep these on hand for Sophie's visits," she explained to Marcus. "Creative minds need nurturing." Lila and Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, examining each treasure with reverence. They began working on a joint masterpiece, their heads bent together in concentration. "You have a remarkable daughter," Eleanor said softly to Marcus. "She has your kind heart." Marcus watched Layla share her favorite blue crayon with Sophie. "She's the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything I do, every extra shift or late night, it's all for her." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "Sophie's been my saving grace since I lost my son and daughter-in-law. Children have a way of pushing us forward when grief tries to hold us back." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the girls create their artwork. After a while, Layla remembered her homework and retrieved her backpack. "Daddy, can you help me with my math?" she asked. "Of course, sweetheart." Marcus led her to his desk, pulling up a spare chair. Sophie trailed after them, curious. "Can I watch? I like math, too." Marcus cleared a space on his desk, and soon both girls were working on their assignments together. He explained multiplication tables patiently, using small drawings to make the concepts clearer. From her doorway, Eleanor observed the scene with quiet appreciation. Marcus's gentle guidance, his patient explanations, the way he celebrated each small victory when the girls solved a problem correctly. It all spoke to a depth of character that went far beyond his impressive resume. She watched him point to a particularly tricky problem, his face animated as he turned it into a story about pizza slices that made both girls laugh while learning. In that moment, Eleanor saw not just the promising executive she'd hired, but a man of genuine integrity and compassion. A warm certainty settled in her heart as she watched them work. Perhaps it wasn't just chance that had brought Marcus to that bus stop on that cold night. Perhaps there was a greater purpose at work, one that went beyond business decisions and corporate ladders. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow across Marcus's desk as he continued helping the girls with their homework, unaware of Eleanor's thoughtful gaze. The Monday morning sunshine did nothing to brighten the mood in the conference room. Tension hung heavy in the air as Eleanor stood at the head of the table, her normally composed face etched with worry. Around her sat the executive team, their expressions ranging from concerned to outright panicked. "Steinway Industries is threatening to pull out of the merger," Eleanor announced, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "They claim our proposed terms don't adequately protect their workers." Marcus sat quietly, his mind already racing through the numbers. He'd spent the last 3 weeks reviewing every detail of the merger, including the human cost that often got overlooked in big business deals. "This is a disaster," Robert Chen, the head of operations, muttered. "We've invested months in this deal. The board will have our heads if it falls through." Janet, who had become Marcus's closest ally at the firm, spoke up. "What exactly are their concerns?" Eleanor picked up a document. "They're worried about job losses at their Chicago plant. Our efficiency projections suggested we could cut costs by consolidating operations, but that would mean laying off about 30% of their workforce." Marcus felt his heart tighten. Behind those numbers were real families, real lives. He thought of his own struggles, of the times he'd been let go despite his qualifications. His fingers drummed softly on the polished conference table as an idea began to form. "May I speak?" Marcus asked, his voice quiet but firm. Eleanor nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. "Please do, Marcus." He stood, straightening his tie. Some of the older executives shifted in their seats, their skepticism barely concealed. Marcus took a deep breath and began. "I've been looking at the numbers from a different angle," he said, walking to the whiteboard. "What if instead of consolidating operations, we restructured them?" He began writing figures on the board. "Steinway's Chicago plant has older equipment, yes, but their workers have an average of 15 years of experience. That's knowledge we can't put a price on." The room grew quiet as Marcus continued. "If we invest in modernizing their facility instead of shutting it down, we could increase productivity by 40% within 2 years. The initial cost would be higher, but the long-term benefits." He drew a graph showing projected growth. "We'd retain skilled workers, boost morale, and actually save money on training and recruitment." Robert Chen leaned forward. "That's a significant upfront investment, Bennett. The board won't like it." "The board likes profits," Marcus countered respectfully, "and this plan delivers them. But more importantly, it shows Steinway we value what matters to them, their people." He turned to Eleanor. "Sometimes the compassionate choice is also the smart business choice." Eleanor studied the numbers Marcus had written, her expression thoughtful. "How quickly could you put together a detailed proposal?" "I already have one," Marcus replied, pulling a folder from his briefcase. He'd worked on it late into the night after putting Layla to bed. "Complete with 5-year projections and implementation timeline." The next hour was spent reviewing Marcus's proposal. Questions were asked, concerns raised, but gradually, the tension in the room began to ease. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the soundness of his plan. Eleanor made a phone call to Steinway's CEO right there in the conference room, outlining the new approach. The relief was palpable when she hung up, a smile spreading across her face. "They're interested," she announced. "Very interested. They want to meet tomorrow to discuss details." The room erupted in excited chatter. Janet caught Marcus's eye and gave him a proud nod. He sat back in his chair, letting out a long breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Later that afternoon, Eleanor called an impromptu gathering of the entire office staff. Marcus stood to the side, uncomfortable with the attention as she addressed the crowd. "Today, we were reminded that success in business isn't just about numbers, it's about people," Eleanor began, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "When faced with a crisis, Marcus Bennett showed us that compassion and profitability aren't mutually exclusive. His solution not only saved our deal with Steinway, but also protected hundreds of jobs." She turned to face Marcus directly. "In my 40 years in business, I've rarely seen such a perfect blend of financial acumen and human understanding. This is exactly why I chose you for this position, Marcus. Not to spite your background, but because of it. You understand what's at stake for real people, and that makes you invaluable to this company." Marcus felt something shift inside him as he looked at the faces around him. For the first time since starting this job, he saw genuine respect in the eyes of his colleagues, not just tolerance or skepticism. He thought of his father, who had always told him that character would matter more than credentials in the end. Eleanor's words hung in the air. "This is what leadership looks like. This is what excellence looks like. And I'm proud to have Marcus Bennett helping to shape the future of this company." The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was genuine, enthusiastic. Janet wiped a tear from her eye. Even Robert Chen nodded approvingly. Marcus stood straighter, adjusting his tie. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about his past struggles or the obstacles he'd faced. For the first time since starting this job, he felt truly seen, not as a risk or an experiment, but as a capable leader who had earned his place at the table. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as Marcus's old sedan followed Eleanor's detailed directions to her North Shore estate. His fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel, while Lala bounced excitedly in the back seat, wearing her favorite purple dress. "Daddy, is this really where Miss Eleanor lives?" Layla pressed her face against the window as they turned onto a tree-lined private drive. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Sure is, sweetheart." The house ahead was grand but welcoming, with warm yellow lights glowing in every window. Ivory-colored columns framed the entrance, and well-tended gardens stretched out on either side. As they pulled up to the circular driveway, Eleanor appeared at the front door, wearing a casual sweater and slacks instead of her usual business attire. She waved warmly, and beside her stood Sophie, practically bouncing with excitement. "I was worried you might get lost," Eleanor called out as they stepped from the car. "The directions can be a bit tricky the first time. We made it just fine, thanks to your excellent instructions," Marcus replied, straightening his tie self-consciously. He'd changed after work, but still felt underdressed. Layla shyly held his hand until Sophie ran down the steps toward her. "Want to see my playroom? I have so many games." The two girls disappeared inside as Eleanor led Marcus through the foyer. The house was beautiful, but lived in, with family photos lining the walls and comfortable furniture that invited you to sit down. "I hope you like Italian," Eleanor said, guiding him toward the kitchen. "I made my grandmother's lasagna recipe." The kitchen smelled amazing, rich with garlic and herbs. "You cook?" Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. Eleanor laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Don't let the CEO title fool you. I believe in doing things myself when I can. Would you like to help with the salad?" Soon they fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side in the kitchen. The sounds of the girls' laughter drifted down from upstairs, punctuated by the occasional thump of running feet. "They sound like they're having fun," Marcus said, carefully slicing cucumbers. Sophie's been talking about this dinner all day, Eleanor replied, checking the lasagna. She doesn't have many close friends. Being the CEO's granddaughter can be isolating. Marcus nodded, understanding. Layla, too. It's not easy being the kid whose mom. He trailed off, focusing intently on the vegetables. Eleanor touched his arm gently. Loss shapes us, doesn't it? But it doesn't have to define us. The simple gesture and words made Marcus's throat tight. He cleared it quickly. The deal today, I hope I didn't overstep with my suggestion. Overstep? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Marcus, you saved that deal. Your solution was brilliant because it considered both the numbers and the human element. That's rare in our business. Before Marcus could respond, thundering footsteps announced the girls' return. They burst into the kitchen, faces flushed with excitement. "Grandma, can we set the table?" Sophie asked, already pulling plates from a cabinet she could barely reach. "Careful there," Eleanor cautioned, but her eyes sparkled. "Yes, you two can help, but walk, don't run." They ate in the formal dining room, but there was nothing formal about the meal. The girls chattered about their games, the adults shared funny work stories, and everyone had seconds of Eleanor's lasagna. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so relaxed, so at home. After dinner, they moved to the living room for dessert, homemade apple pie that filled the room with cinnamon and warmth. Sophie showed Lila her collection of stuffed animals, carefully explaining the name and story behind each one. "This is Mr. Whiskers," Sophie said, holding up a well-loved gray cat. "He helps me sleep when I miss my mom and dad." She hesitated, then pressed the toy into Layla's hands. "You can have him if you want." Layla's eyes went wide. "Really? But he's special to you." Sophie nodded solemnly. "That's why I want you to have him, because you're my friend." Marcus watched the exchange, his heart full. Beside him on the sofa, Eleanor discreetly wiped her eyes. The evening passed too quickly, and soon it was time to leave. The girls hugged goodbye as if they'd known each other forever, while Eleanor pressed a container of leftover lasagna into Marcus's hands. "This was wonderful," she said softly. "Please don't be strangers." The night air was cool as Marcus and Layla walked to their car. Layla clutched Mr. Whiskers to her chest, yawning despite her obvious happiness. As they drove through the quiet streets toward home, Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at his daughter, who was already starting to doze. "Maybe things really are changing for us," he whispered. Layla smiled sleepily, clutching the small toy Sophie gave her. Marcus adjusted his borrowed tuxedo for the 100th time, trying to calm his racing heart as he stood in the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, their light dancing off the polished marble floors. Around him, Chicago's business elite mingled in designer evening wear, their jewelry catching the light like stars. "Stop fidgeting," Janet whispered beside him, looking elegant in a navy blue gown. "You look great." "This tux belongs to Janet's husband," Marcus admitted quietly to Eleanor, who had just joined them. "I've never been to anything this fancy before." Eleanor, resplendent in a classic black evening gown, gave him a warm smile. "It's not about the tux, Marcus. It's about the man wearing it." She squeezed his arm reassuringly. "Are you ready?" Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of Lila at home with their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. "As ready as I'll ever be." Eleanor clinked her glass with a silver spoon, the clear ring silencing the crowd. Hundreds of faces turned toward them, and Marcus felt his mouth go dry. He recognized several board members near the front, their expressions carefully neutral. "Distinguished guests," Eleanor began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Tonight, we celebrate not just another successful year, but a remarkable transformation within our company." She turned to Marcus with pride in her eyes. "6 months ago, I made a decision that some questioned. I offered a CFO training position to a man I had only just met, but whose character I recognized immediately." The crowd murmured, and Marcus stood straighter, channeling the confidence he wanted to feel. "Marcus Bennett joined us with an unconventional background," Eleanor continued. "He didn't come from an Ivy League school or a Fortune 500 company, but what he brought was something far more valuable: integrity, innovative thinking, and genuine compassion for others. She gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward as practiced. The spotlight felt warm on his face as Eleanor continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to introduce you to the future Chief Financial Officer of Whitfield Industries, Marcus Bennett." Applause filled the room, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. Marcus saw Janet beaming, along with several of his colleagues who had become friends over the past months. Some faces in the crowd showed genuine warmth, while others, particularly among the board members, displayed only cold politeness. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm honored by your trust in me." Eleanor raised her glass. "Marcus has already proven himself invaluable to our company. Many of you know about the Peterson deal. What you might not know is that we almost lost it entirely." The crowd's attention sharpened. The Peterson deal had been front-page news in the business section, praised as a masterpiece of corporate negotiation. "When our traditional approaches failed," Eleanor explained, "Marcus proposed something revolutionary. Instead of focusing solely on profit margins, he suggested we restructure the deal to protect jobs at Peterson's factories. His solution not only saved the agreement but strengthened it, proving that compassion and good business sense can go hand in hand." More applause followed, though Marcus noticed several board members in the front row barely moving their hands. Their eyes were cold, calculating, as they watched him. Eleanor raised her voice slightly. "In my 40 years in business, I've learned that true leadership isn't about where you came from or what schools you attended. It's about vision, integrity, and the courage to do what's right. Marcus Bennett embodies these qualities, and I am proud to have him as part of our leadership team." The applause this time was thunderous from most of the crowd. Marcus caught sight of Mr. Harrison, one of the most vocal board members, whispering to his colleagues, his face tight with disapproval. But Marcus held his head high, remembering Lila's words that morning, "You're gonna be great, Daddy. You always are." Eleanor clinked her glass again. "Tonight isn't just about celebrating success, it's about recognizing that sometimes the greatest opportunities come in unexpected packages. 6 months ago, on a cold night at a bus stop, I experienced firsthand the kindness and character of the man standing beside me now. That night showed me not just who Marcus Bennett is, but what he could bring to our company." She turned to face Marcus directly. "You've proven that compassion and business success aren't mutually exclusive. You've shown that fresh perspectives and genuine concern for others can transform how we do business. And you've reminded us all that sometimes the best decisions aren't the obvious ones." Marcus felt emotion well up in his throat as he remembered that snowy night, the simple decision to give away his coat. He never could have imagined where that moment would lead. The ballroom erupted in applause once more. Janet wiped away a tear, and several executives stepped forward to shake Marcus's hand. Yet through it all, he couldn't help but notice the cluster of board members at their table, their applause perfunctory, their eyes hard with something that looked like challenge. Eleanor raised her glass one final time. "To Marcus Bennett, and to the future of Whitfield Industries." "To Marcus," the crowd echoed, glasses lifting throughout the ballroom. Crystal clinked, champagne sparkled, and the orchestra began to play again. Marcus stood tall beside Eleanor, accepting congratulations from well-wishers, while in the front row, the board members remained seated, their faces masks of polite disdain. As the music swelled and conversations resumed around them, Eleanor leaned close to Marcus. "You've earned this moment. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." Marcus nodded, grateful for her unwavering support, even as he felt the weight of expectation and resistance settling on his shoulders. But he straightened his borrowed tuxedo jacket once more, remembering why he was here, for Layla, for their future, and for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. The morning sun streamed through the office windows, but something felt off to Marcus as he walked through the glass doors of the corporate building. The usual friendly nods from security were missing. Marcus adjusted his tie, the same one he'd worn to the gala last night, and headed to the elevator. "Hold it!" he called out, seeing familiar faces inside. 2 junior accountants who normally chatted with him about sports quickly looked down at their phones. The doors closed before he could reach them. Marcus frowned, pressing the button for another elevator. Strange. Just last night, these same people had been congratulating him, raising their glasses to Eleanor's announcement about his future as CFO. When he finally reached his floor, the usual morning buzz felt different. Conversations stopped as he passed by. Sharon from Accounts Receivable, who always brought him coffee on Mondays, hurried past with barely a glance. At his desk, Marcus found his files scattered, not how he'd left them the night before. He started organizing them, trying to shake off the growing unease in his stomach. "Morning, Marcus," Janet said, stopping by his desk. Her smile seemed forced, worried. "Some meeting this morning, huh? What meeting?" "Oh." Janet shifted uncomfortably. "The emergency board meeting. I thought you knew." Marcus's heart sank. "No one told me about any meeting. It started an hour ago. Eleanor's there too." Janet glanced around before lowering her voice. "Listen, Marcus, people are talking. Someone's been digging." Before she could finish, Thomas Green, one of the senior board members, strode past. His cold stare made Marcus sit up straighter. Throughout the morning, Marcus tried to focus on work, but the atmosphere grew heavier. His computer seemed slower than usual. Files he needed for an urgent report were missing from the shared drive. When he asked IT for help, they said they'd get to it when they could. During lunch, the break room fell silent when he entered. A group of analysts grabbed their food and left. Marcus sat alone, his sandwich tasting like cardboard in his mouth. He thought about calling Eleanor but stopped himself. She'd given him this chance he needed to prove he could handle whatever this was. Back at his desk, Marcus noticed his family photo was slightly askew. He'd left it perfectly straight that morning, the picture of him and Layla at the park, her missing front tooth visible in her wide smile. He adjusted it, then noticed his drawer wasn't fully closed. As he opened it, his breath caught. There, on top of his stapler, lay a printed memo. The paper felt heavy in his hands as he picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly. The header was blank, but the content made his stomach turn. Details about his juvenile arrest record from 20 years ago spread across the page in cold, stark typography. He'd been 16, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, caught up with the wrong crowd. The charges had been dropped, the record sealed. He'd turned his life around, worked his way through community college, built a career. But there it was, every damning detail, even things he'd tried to forget, the officer's name, the holding cell number, his mother's tears at the station. Someone had gone to great lengths to dig this up. Marcus sat very still, the memo clutched in his hands, as the office bustled around him. The whispers suddenly made sense, the avoided glances, the missing files. Someone wanted him gone, and they'd found the perfect weapon to use against him. The photo of Layla caught his eye again. Her smile, so pure and trusting, made his chest ache. He'd promised her things were changing for them. Now, holding this memo, he wondered if he'd spoken too soon. He carefully folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. The weight of it seemed to pull him down, like the winter coat he'd given away on that snowy night that had started all of this. But this time, there was no warmth in the sacrifice, only the cold reality of his past catching up to him. Through his office window, he could see the Chicago skyline, the same view that had filled him with hope just weeks ago. Now those same buildings seemed to loom over him, casting long shadows across his desk as the afternoon sun began to fade. The memo felt like it was burning a hole in his pocket. Each time someone walked past his desk, he wondered if they were the one who had left it. Was it Thomas from the board, one of the resentful middle managers? Or someone else, someone who smiled to his face while plotting his downfall? His phone buzzed a text from Layla with a photo of her science project. "Look what I made, Daddy." The sight of her proud smile made his throat tight. He'd worked so hard to give her a father she could look up to bury that 16-year-old kid's mistakes so deep they'd never touch her life. Now those mistakes were here, typed out in black and white, threatening everything he'd built. The memo in his pocket felt heavier with each passing minute. like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Thunder rumbled outside the boardroom windows as Marcus sat before the stern faces of the board members. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, knuckles white with tension. The leather chair that had once felt like a symbol of his success now seemed to swallow him whole. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her usual commanding presence somewhat diminished by the hostility filling the room. She held a manila folder in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she looked at its contents. "This is a witch hunt," Eleanor declared, her voice sharp with anger. "Marcus Bennett has proven himself time and time again. The Davidson deal alone. With all due respect, Eleanor." Richard Morton, the silver-haired vice president of operations, cut in. He slid copies of documents across the polished mahogany table. "We're not here to discuss Mr. Bennett's recent performance. These records paint a very different picture." Marcus's throat tightened as he watched the board members examine the papers. His juvenile arrest record from 20 years ago stared up at him in harsh black and white. A stupid mistake he'd made as a teenager, trying to help a friend who'd led him down the wrong path. A history of financial difficulties. Another board member, Patricia Chen, noted coldly. Multiple defaulted loans before his wife's passing. Credit card debt. "Is this really who we want managing our company's finances?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "Those struggles came from medical bills during my wife's illness. We understand personal hardships, Mr. Bennett," Morton interrupted. "But this company's reputation, his reputation is one of integrity," Eleanor countered. She stood up, her eyes blazing. "I've watched him work miracles with our accounts. He saved the Davidson deal when everyone in this room had given up hope. His thinking is irrelevant," Morton snapped. "The board has concerns about his judgment, his background, his fitness for this position." Marcus felt each word like a physical blow. He looked around the table, seeing the mix of disdain and manufactured concern on their faces. Only Eleanor and two others showed any sign of support. "I've been transparent about my past," Marcus said quietly. "During my initial interview, with Eleanor only," Chen pointed out. "The board was never properly consulted about your appointment to this training position." Eleanor's hands flattened against the table. "As CEO, I have the authority. The board has the authority to override appointments we deem inappropriate," Morton stated. "And we're exercising that authority now." Rain lashed against the windows as silence fell over the room. Marcus felt the weight of years of hard work, of hopes and dreams, crumbling around him. He thought of Layla, of the promises he'd made her about their future. "We'll need your resignation from the CFO training program," Morton continued, his voice artificially sympathetic. "You may return to your original accounting position, or no." Eleanor's voice cut through the room like steel. "If you remove him from this position, you lose him entirely, and you lose one of the most valuable assets this company has ever had." Marcus looked at Eleanor, touched by her fierce defense, but knowing it was futile. He could see the votes in the eyes around the table. "All those in favor of terminating Mr. Bennett's CFO training position, effective immediately," Morton called out, hands raised around the table. 8-3. The decision was made. Marcus stood slowly, his legs feeling like lead. "I understand," he said, his dignity intact even as his world collapsed. "I'll clear out my office today." "Marcus," Eleanor started, her voice breaking slightly. He managed a small smile for her. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield, for everything you tried to do." The rain soaked through his suit as he left the building, his personal items in a small box under his arm. The security guard, who had always greeted him with a smile, now looked away. The weight of failure pressed down on his shoulders as he walked to his car. That evening, Marcus sat on the edge of Lila's bed, forcing his face into a smile as she showed him her homework. Her innocent excitement about learning multiplication tables felt like a knife in his heart. "Did you have a good day at work, Daddy?" she asked, snuggling under her covers. Marcus tucked the blanket around her shoulders, swallowing hard. "Some days are harder than others, baby girl. But seeing you always makes everything better." "I love you, Daddy," Layla said, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "I love you too, sweetheart." Marcus kissed her forehead, his vision blurring with unshed tears. Sweet dreams. He waited until he closed her door, before letting the first tear fall, standing in the darkened hallway of their small apartment, the sound of rain outside matching the storm in his heart. The winter sun barely pierced through the grimy windows of Pete's auto shop, where Marcus Bennett worked under a rusty Ford pickup. Grease stained his worn coveralls, a far cry from the crisp suits he'd worn just weeks ago. His muscles ached from the physical labor, so different from the office work he'd grown accustomed to. "Hey, Bennett, you missed a spot under there," Pete called out, his voice gruff but not unkind. The older mechanic had given Marcus morning shifts without asking too many questions. "Got it, Pete," Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. The smell of motor oil and rubber filled his nostrils. He checked his watch. Almost time to head to his afternoon job stocking shelves at Wilson's Market. The jobs barely covered the bills, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to apply for corporate positions. The thought of walking into another office, of facing those questioning stares and whispered judgments, made his stomach turn. Better to work with his hands, even if his accounting degree gathered dust. At home that evening, Marcus heated up a can of soup for dinner. Layla sat at their small kitchen table, homework spread out before her. She watched him with those knowing eyes that sometimes seemed too wise for her young age. "Daddy?" she asked softly, pushing aside her math worksheet. "Yes, baby?" Marcus stirred the soup, trying to ignore the tremor in his hands from exhaustion. "Are you okay? You look really tired." Her voice held that mixture of innocence and concern that always squeezed his heart. Marcus stopped stirring. The simple question hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the counter's edge, struggling to find words that wouldn't frighten her. How could he explain that her daddy, who was supposed to be strong and successful, had fallen so far? He began, then cleared his throat. "I'm just working hard, that's all. Nothing for you to worry about." Layla got up from her chair and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You don't smile as much anymore," she mumbled into his shirt. Marcus closed his eyes, fighting back tears. He remembered promising her he'd smile at his interview with Eleanor, back when hope felt possible. Now each smile felt like a mask he wore to protect her. "Miss Sophie asked about you at school today," Layla continued. "She said her grandma misses us." The mention of Eleanor and Sophie sent a fresh wave of shame through Marcus. He gently disentangled himself from Lila's hug, busying himself with pouring soup into bowls. "That's nice of them," he managed. "How about we eat and then get your homework done?" Later that night, after tucking Lila in, Marcus sat alone in their small living room. The television stayed dark. He couldn't afford cable anymore. Streetlights cast shadows through the window, and somewhere distant, a siren wailed. He thought about the stack of bills on the kitchen counter, the rent coming due, Lila's growing feet needing new shoes. The weight of it all pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. Marcus slid from the worn armchair onto his knees. The carpet was thin beneath them, but he barely noticed the discomfort. His hands clasped together, trembling slightly. "Lord," he whispered, his voice catching. "I don't understand. I tried to do everything right. To be honest, to work hard, to help others." He paused, remembering the night he'd given away his coat. Had that act of kindness led to this fall? No, he couldn't regret showing compassion. Tears finally broke free, rolling down his cheeks. "I'm trying to be strong for Layla, but I'm failing her. Failed as a father, failed as..." His voice cracked. "As a man, please, I need guidance. Show me the way forward. Help me be the father she deserves." The room remained silent, except for his ragged breathing. Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, indifferent to one man's prayers. Marcus stayed on his knees, head bowed, feeling more lost and alone than he had since losing his wife. The shame of his situation wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. Every job application ignored. Every former colleague who wouldn't meet his eyes at the grocery store. Every night of lying awake wondering how to make ends meet. It all crashed over him in waves. His fingers twisted together as he continued to pray, seeking comfort in the familiar words, trying to find the faith that had always sustained him. But tonight, answers seemed far away, and the darkness pressed close. The evening shadows stretched across their small apartment as Marcus sat at their worn kitchen table, bills scattered before him like fallen leaves. Each piece of paper seemed to mock him with red stamps and final notices. His shoulders slumped under the invisible weight of responsibility and lost dreams. The scratch of Lila's colored pencils filled the quiet space as she worked intently at her end of the table. Every few minutes, she'd peek up at him with those knowing eyes that seemed to see right through his brave face. Marcus tried to focus on the numbers that wouldn't add up, but his mind kept drifting back to the corporate office, to Eleanor's disappointed face, to the whispers in the hallways. "Daddy?" Layla's soft voice broke through his thoughts. "I made something for you." Marcus forced a smile, grateful for the distraction. "What is it, sweetheart?" Layla slid a piece of paper across the table, carefully avoiding the bills. The drawing was done in bright colors, blues and whites for the snow, brown for the figures, and a bold red shape that could only be his winter coat. Marcus's throat tightened as he recognized the scene, himself standing at a bus stop, placing his coat around a stranger's shoulders. "That's you," Layla pointed proudly. "Miss Eleanor told Sophie about that night, and Sophie told me. I wanted to draw it because—" She paused, gathering her thoughts like only children can. "Because that's who you really are, Daddy." Marcus stared at the simple drawing, feeling his eyes burn. The stick figures were basic, but there was something in the way his daughter had captured that moment. The falling snow, the gentle gesture, the kindness that had seemed so natural at the time. "You see," Layla continued, moving to stand beside him, "even when things were hard, you gave away your only good coat. That's why you're still my hero." She wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Don't stop being the man who gives his coat." The words hit Marcus like a physical force. Out of the mouth of babes, they say, but this was something more. His daughter had seen through all the shame and doubt, straight to the truth he'd been too beaten down to remember. "Baby girl," he whispered, pulling her onto his lap. "How did you get so wise?" Layla giggled, snuggling against his chest. "Mom always said I got it from you." The mention of her mother, rather than bringing its usual ache, filled Marcus with warmth. She was right. His late wife had always believed in his capacity for kindness, just as their daughter did now. "You know what else I drew?" Layla reached for the paper again, pointing to something in the background of the scene. Behind the figures, she'd drawn a bright yellow sun breaking through the gray clouds. "Because after the storm, the sun always comes out. That's what you tell me, remember?" Marcus looked at the drawing again, seeing it with new eyes. He'd been so focused on what he'd lost that he'd forgotten who he was. The man who gave his coat away on a cold night, not because he could afford to, but because it was right. The man who'd worked his way up from nothing, who'd raised a daughter alone, who'd earned Eleanor's trust through honest hard work and integrity. "The people who hurt you," Layla said suddenly, her face serious, "they don't know you like I do. They don't know about the coat, or how you always help Mrs. Rodriguez with her groceries, or how you taught Tommy from downstairs to ride his bike." Each example was like a small light pushing back the darkness that had settled over him these past weeks. Marcus hugged his daughter tighter, amazed at how clearly she saw him, not as the world did, but as he truly was. "You're right, baby," he said, his voice growing stronger. "They don't know me, but I forgot something important too." "What's that?" "I forgot that being knocked down isn't the same as being defeated." He touched the sun in her drawing. "And you're right about the storm passing. It always does." Lila beamed at him, and in her smile, Marcus saw not just love, but unshakable faith. His daughter believed in him completely, without reservation or doubt. Her trust wasn't based on his job title or bank account. It was based on who he was as a person, as her father, as the man who would give away his only coat to help a stranger. The realization swept through him like a cleansing wind, clearing away the fog of self-doubt and shame. He'd been acting like a man who deserved what happened to him, but the truth was different. He deserved to fight back, not just for himself, but for this precious girl who believed in him so completely. Marcus gathered Lila in his arms, holding her close as if she were his anchor to all that was good and true in the world. She hugged him back just as fiercely, and in that embrace he found his strength again. The strength that had carried him through his wife's death, through countless nights of worry, through every obstacle life had thrown at him. "I love you, Daddy," Layla whispered. "I love you too, baby girl," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And thank you for reminding me who I am." He held her tighter, feeling her small heart beating against his chest, steady and sure, like her faith in him. In that moment, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't the end of his story. The man who gave away his coat wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. Eleanor Whitfield sat alone in her expansive office, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her normally pristine desk was covered with financial reports and internal memos. The clock on the wall showed 9:45 p.m., but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Not when something felt so wrong. "Mrs. Whitfield?" Janet, her assistant, poked her head through the door. "The board members are asking for your response to their ultimatum." Eleanor's jaw tightened. Earlier that day, they'd presented her with a prepared statement, a public denouncement of Marcus Bennett that would protect the company's reputation. The mere thought of it made her stomach turn. "Tell them my answer remains the same," Eleanor said firmly. "I will not throw an innocent man under the bus to appease their prejudices." Janet nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "I thought you might say that. I brought you some tea." She set down a steaming cup on the corner of Eleanor's desk. "Thank you, dear." Eleanor's eyes softened. "You can head home now. It's late. Are you sure? I could help you with." Janet gestured at the scattered papers. Eleanor shook her head. "No, go home to your family. I just need to check a few more things." After Janet left, Eleanor pulled out her reading glasses and returned to the financial statements. Something had been nagging at her since Marcus's dismissal. The numbers didn't add up, literally. Small discrepancies she'd noticed over the past few months suddenly seemed more significant. She opened her laptop and began cross-referencing dates. The night grew later as she dug deeper, making notes in her precise handwriting. A pattern began to emerge, one that made her blood run cold. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Richard Blackwood, one of the board members who'd been most vocal against Marcus. "Eleanor, I trust you've reconsidered your position." His voice oozed false concern. "The statement needs to go out first thing tomorrow." "Actually, Richard, I've been reviewing some interesting documents." Eleanor kept her voice steady. "Perhaps you'd like to explain the irregular transfers from our charitable foundation." A pause. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "No. What about the shell company that's been receiving consulting fees, the one registered to your brother-in-law's address?" The line went silent for a moment. When Richard spoke again, his voice had an edge. "You're treading dangerous ground, Eleanor. The board has already made its decision about Bennett. Don't let misplaced loyalty cloud your judgment." "Loyalty?" Eleanor felt anger rise in her chest. "Is that what you call basic human decency? Or is it what you call noticing that the same people who pushed hardest to remove Marcus are the ones with something to hide?" "You're making accusations you can't prove," Richard snapped. "Can't I?" Eleanor's voice was steel. "I have 40 years of experience in this business, Richard. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Or did you just assume I was too soft-hearted to look?" She heard him inhale sharply. "Eleanor, be reasonable. The company's reputation," Eleanor cut him off, "was built on integrity, something you seem to have forgotten." She ended the call, her hand shaking slightly as she set down the phone. Opening her email, she began forwarding key documents to her personal account. Years of business had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now they were screaming that she needed backup copies. The night deepened as Eleanor continued her investigation. Each new document revealed more connections, more suspicious patterns. What had started as a hint of wrongdoing was becoming a clear picture of systematic fraud. She thought of Marcus, his quiet dignity, his brilliant mind, his compassion. The way he'd given his only good coat to a stranger on a cold night. The way he'd saved their biggest deal, not through cutthroat tactics, but through finding a solution that helped everyone. And she thought of how quickly some board members had moved to destroy him when he started asking questions about the company's charitable giving. Of course, she whispered to herself, he would have found it eventually. That's why they needed him gone. Eleanor glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. She picked up her phone again, this time scrolling to Marcus's number. She'd kept it, despite the board's insistence that she cut all contact. Her finger hovered over the call button. Was it too late? Would he even want to hear from her after everything that had happened? But she thought of his daughter Lila, of the kind of world they were creating by letting injustice win. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when she heard his voice, tired but clear. Mrs. Whitfield? Marcus, she said, her voice urgent. I think we've found the real enemy here. Eleanor's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up document after document. Marcus sat beside her, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up as he pored over financial statements spread across her desk. The office was dark, except for her desk lamp, casting long shadows across the walls. Look at this, Marcus said, his voice quiet but intense. He slid a paper toward Eleanor, his finger pointing to a series of transactions. These numbers don't add up. The dates match when Richard Thompson took over the international accounts. Eleanor leaned forward, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The same Richard Thompson who leaked your records to the board? Yes, ma'am. Marcus's jaw tightened. And these transfers, they're just small enough to slip under routine audits. But when you add them up over the past year, millions, Eleanor whispered, her face pale in the lamplight. He's been stealing millions. Marcus nodded, reaching for another stack of papers. He's smart about it too, breaking it up into smaller amounts, routing it through different accounts. He paused, running a hand over his tired face. That's why it looked wrong to me from the start. When you work 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet, you learn to spot every penny. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she picked up her coffee cup. He must have realized you'd notice eventually. That's why he was so quick to discredit you. The timing makes sense, Marcus agreed, pulling out his notebook where he'd been tracking the suspicious patterns. The leaks about my past started right after I questioned those international numbers in the board meeting. They worked in focused silence for the next hour, building their case. Eleanor's usually immaculate office was now strewn with papers, sticky notes, and printed emails. Marcus had created a timeline on the whiteboard, connecting dates of suspicious transfers with key company events. Here, Eleanor said suddenly, her voice sharp. The day before he leaked your juvenile record, Thompson made 3 separate transfers to an offshore account. She swiveled her computer screen toward Marcus, each just under the reporting threshold. Marcus leaned in, his exhaustion forgotten. He was preparing his escape route. If anyone started asking questions about the missing money, they'd be too busy looking at you instead, Eleanor finished, anger coloring her words, using prejudice and fear to hide his own crimes. Marcus stood up, walking to the window. The city stretched out below, a sea of lights in the darkness. He remembered how proud he'd felt standing in this same spot when Eleanor first offered him the job. How full of hope he'd been. Marcus, Eleanor called softly. He turned to see her holding up a flash drive. I have copies of everything. Bank records, transfer dates, Thompson's emails. She smiled, a fierce light in her eyes. He didn't count on me having override access to all company accounts. Marcus returned to the desk, methodically organizing their evidence into clear, undeniable proof of Thompson's crimes. His hands were steady now, his mind sharp. This wasn't just about clearing his name anymore. It was about justice. What made you start looking deeper? He asked Eleanor as they worked. She paused, considering. I've been in business 40 years, Marcus. I've learned to trust my instincts about people. She met his eyes. The man who gives his only good coat to a stranger in the snow? That man doesn't deserve what they did to you. Marcus swallowed hard, touched by her faith in him. They returned to their task, double-checking figures and printing final copies. By midnight, they had 3 complete sets of evidence, one for the board, one for their lawyers, and one for safekeeping. As they organized the last of the documents, Marcus felt something he hadn't in weeks: strength. Not just hope, but real strength. The kind that comes from knowing the truth and having the courage to fight for it. "We've got him," Eleanor said, closing the final folder with satisfaction. She looked at Marcus with pride. "Are you ready for tomorrow's board meeting?" Marcus straightened his tie and squared his shoulders. The weight of doubt and shame that had been crushing him was lifting. He thought of Layla's drawing, of her unwavering belief in him. "Yes, ma'am," he answered. "More than ready." Marcus stood in the elevator beside Eleanor, clutching a thick folder of evidence against his chest. His heart hammered, but his resolve was steady. Eleanor reached over and squeezed his arm. "Ready?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Ready." The elevator doors opened to the top floor's conference room. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see the board members already seated, their faces stern and expectant. Richard Chen, the executive who had orchestrated Marcus's downfall, sat with an air of smug confidence. Eleanor strode in first, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light, her bearing regal and determined. Marcus followed, standing tall despite the questioning murmurs that rippled through the room. "What is he doing here?" demanded Thomas Bradford, one of the senior board members. "This is a closed meeting. Mr. Bennett is here at my request," Eleanor said, her voice carrying authority that silenced the room. "And after what we're about to share, you'll understand why." Marcus began distributing copies of their findings while Eleanor took her place at the head of the table. He could feel Richard's eyes boring into him, but he didn't flinch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor began, "we've discovered serious financial irregularities that demand immediate attention." She nodded to Marcus. "Mr. Bennett, please proceed." Marcus stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. 3 weeks ago, someone leaked information about my past to discredit me. But while investigating that breach, we uncovered something far more troubling. He clicked through a presentation on the screen, displaying complex financial records. Over the past 18 months, approximately $2.3 million has been systematically diverted through a series of shell companies. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Richard's face had gone pale. "If you'll turn to page 3, Marcus continued, you'll see the trail of transactions. Each transfer was carefully hidden within legitimate business expenses, but the pattern is clear when you know where to look." Eleanor stood. "And we know exactly where to look, thanks to Mr. Bennett's exceptional financial acumen, the very skills some of you questioned." Marcus highlighted specific transactions on the screen. These companies, Meridian Solutions, Apex Consulting, and Blue Harbor Partners, all trace back to a single beneficial owner. He paused, turning to face Richard Chen. "Isn't that right, Mr. Chen?" Richard shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. "This is absurd. You can't possibly—" "We have the documentation," Eleanor cut in sharply, "including records of offshore accounts and emails discussing the scheme. Would you like us to share those as well?" The board members were leafing through the evidence, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to anger. Thomas Bradford's face had turned red with fury. Not at Marcus this time, but at Richard. "You orchestrated the smear campaign against Mr. Bennett because he was getting too close to discovering your theft," Eleanor stated. "You manipulated this board's prejudices to protect yourself." Richard's composure cracked. "You have no proof that I—" "Actually," Marcus interrupted, pulling out one final document, "we do. This is the IP address trace of the computer used to access my sealed juvenile records. It matches your office computer, Mr. Chen." The silence in the room was deafening. Then Bradford slammed his hand on the table. "Call security, now." 2 security guards appeared within minutes. Richard was escorted out, protesting weakly, his face ashen. The board sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Eleanor remained standing, her voice firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a decision to make. Not just about Mr. Chen's removal, but about correcting a grave injustice done to an honest man." She walked over to stand beside Marcus. "Mr. Bennett didn't just uncover this fraud. He did it after being unjustly stripped of his position. after being humiliated and doubted. Yet he chose to fight for this company's integrity rather than seek revenge. Marcus felt emotion well up in his throat as Eleanor continued. This is the man you doubted. This is the character you questioned. I ask you now, what does that say about our own judgment? Bradford was the first to speak, his voice heavy with regret. I move to reinstate Mr. Bennett to his position as CFO in training, effective immediately. He looked directly at Marcus. And I personally owe you an apology, sir. Seconded, came another voice, then another. The vote was unanimous. Eleanor smiled, her eyes bright with pride. Mr. Bennett, welcome back to your rightful position as our Chief Financial Officer in training. The applause started slowly, then built to a genuine, thunderous expression of respect and admiration. Marcus stood tall, emotion tight in his chest, but his head held high. He saw Janet, his early supporter, beaming from the doorway where a crowd of employees had gathered. Thank you, he said simply, his voice carrying clearly across the room. I look forward to serving this company with the same integrity and commitment I've always believed in. The applause grew louder. Board members stood, coming forward to shake his hand. Eleanor watched with satisfaction as the very people who had doubted Marcus now welcomed him with genuine respect and admiration. Marcus had won more than his position back. He had won something far more valuable, the right to stand tall, exactly as he was, in a place where his character had finally been recognized for its true worth. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the silver in Eleanor's hair as she smiled at him. It was a new day, in more ways than one. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Marcus's corner office, casting a warm glow across his polished desk. Family photos now adorned his workspace, snapshots of Layla's birthday parties, a recent picture of him and Eleanor at a company event, and his favorite, a candid shot of Layla and Sophie playing in Eleanor's garden. Marcus adjusted his tie, still getting used to the feel of being in the CFO's office. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of transitions, meetings, and settling into his new role. But this morning felt different, lighter, more secure. Daddy, look what I drew. Layla's voice rang out as she burst through his office door, Sophie close behind her. Both girls wore matching butterfly hair clips, a gift from Eleanor. Inside voices, remember? Marcus reminded gently, but he couldn't help smiling as Layla thrust a colorful drawing into his hands. It showed 4 stick figures holding hands, clearly meant to be him, Eleanor, Layla, and Sophie. That's us, Sophie explained, pointing at the figures. And look, we drew butterflies all around because Grandma Eleanor says butterflies mean change is beautiful. Marcus's heart warmed at the simple wisdom in those words. Eleanor had become more than just his boss. She was family now, in a way he never expected but desperately needed. A soft knock at the door announced Eleanor's presence. She stood there in her elegant navy suit, her silver hair catching the morning light. I see my office has some competition for the girls' favorite hangout spot, she teased, walking in. Grandma? Sophie ran to hug her, while Layla followed with a shy, Hi, Miss Eleanor. Eleanor had insisted Layla call her by her first name, breaking down the formal barriers bit by bit. I brought some cookies from that bakery you girls love, she said, producing a small paper bag, but only after lunch, okay? The girls nodded eagerly, already planning their afternoon adventures in Eleanor's office, where a small play corner had mysteriously appeared shortly after Marcus took the CFO position. The quarterly reports are ready for review, Marcus said, reaching for a folder on his desk. And the new community outreach program you suggested? I've run the numbers. We can make it work. Eleanor's eyes sparkled with approval. I knew you would find a way. Your perspective on these matters. It's exactly what this company needed. They spent the next hour reviewing documents while the girls played quietly in the corner, their giggles providing a sweet soundtrack to the workday. Marcus noticed how naturally Eleanor shifted between being the commanding CEO and the doting grandmother, how she made space for both roles without diminishing either. Around lunchtime, Janet, the colleague who had first welcomed Marcus, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but the catering for tomorrow's board meeting needs your approval, Mr. Bennett." "Marcus," he corrected warmly. Still, just Marcus. He signed the form she handed him, remembering how she'd encouraged him during those first difficult days. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Eleanor closed her laptop and stood. "I think it's time we called it a day. Marcus, why don't you and Layla join Sophie and me for dinner? There's this lovely little Italian place near my home." Marcus glanced at Layla, who was already bouncing with excitement. "Can we, Daddy, please?" "How can I say no to that face?" he laughed, beginning to pack up his things. The restaurant was cozy and warm, with red checkered tablecloths and soft lighting. Their table sat near a window, where they could see the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. Sophie and Lila shared a plate of spaghetti, giggling as they tried to eat the long noodles without making a mess. Eleanor told stories about her early days building the company, while Marcus shared funny moments from his previous jobs. "Remember when you gave me your coat that night?" Eleanor asked softly during a lull in the conversation. "I still have it, you know." Marcus felt a rush of emotion, remembering that cold evening when he'd had nothing but his faith and his integrity. "I never expected." "That's exactly why it meant so much," Eleanor finished for him. "You gave without expecting anything in return. That's rare in this world." Lila looked up from her pasta. "That's because my daddy's the best," she declared with absolute certainty. Sophie nodded in agreement. "And now we're like a family," she added, reaching for Layla's hand across the table. Marcus watched the girls, then looked at Eleanor, who was discreetly wiping a tear from her eye. The restaurant's warm light cast a gentle glow over their table, creating a bubble of belonging that felt sacred somehow. As their desserts arrived, tiramisu for the adults and ice cream sundaes for the girls, Marcus felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Here they were, 4 people from different worlds, brought together by one simple act of kindness on a winter night. He thought about all the times he'd questioned his worth, all the moments he'd wondered if he would ever provide the life Layla deserved. Now, watching her share ice cream with Sophie, seeing Eleanor beam at both girls with grandmother's love, he felt a deep sense of peace. Quietly, while the others were distracted by their desserts, Marcus bowed his head slightly and whispered a prayer of thanks for second chances, for unexpected family, for the way compassion could transform lives in ways no one could predict. The girls were planning a weekend sleepover. Eleanor was already suggesting they make it a regular thing, and Marcus sat back, taking in the scene before him. Sometimes the best endings weren't endings at all, but new beginnings in disguise. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Bennett, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.